Bam, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Oh, hang on. That didn't even occur to me, because we need to go over here, don't we? Oh, bam, wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. There we go. Hey, everybody. And we have an audio. Woohoo! Okay. Audio is coming through just fine now. Thank you, ma'am. There we go. Hey, everybody. Okay. 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 It's coming through just fine now. And everybody can see what we're working on, right? Yes? Good. Okay. Let's set the live setup just right. Okay. You know what? Let's close this part out. Yes? Good. Make it just a little bit bigger. Live setup just right. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming and saying hi. Let's do a nice little hello. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming and saying hi. And we're going live on TikTok. Let's do a nice little hello. TikTok as well. Do 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 do. And we're going live on TikTok. Okay, and if we zoom in just a little bit, you guys are gonna have an easier time reading this. Yeah? Yes, you are. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, so with another bow, he turned on his heels and he was off. Not 2 minutes later, Mr. Benson returned carrying a colorful red. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, so red covered novel. With another bow, he turned on his heels and he was off. Not 2 minutes later, Mr. Benson returned carrying. And this was quite different. Mr. Benson returned carrying a colorful red covered novel. Quite different from the normally bland tan, gray, brown, or black covers. Pink. Pink seems much better. He returned the novel. He returned the novel. He returned the novel. Do 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 do. Let's think for a second. He returned the novel. With the hint of a wink. With the hint of a wink. He placed the novel in her hands with the hint of a wink. Wink. So subtle. Could have been the twitch of an eye. What on earth is this novel? Is this? Let's think for a second. What on earth is this, Abby? We've got a good thing going. Let's not mess it up. Let's think for a second. What on earth is this? Abby stated with just an ounce of disgust touching her lips. Why? This is a... Why, this is what you asked for, milady. This is a... Oh, there's something good to say here. There is something good to say here. Why, this is what you asked for, milady. This is a... Let's see. Up here, Abby asks, find me a book, something artsy. That's what you asked for, milady. This is... Let's have the book be something romantic, shall we? Some nonsensical romantic book. As Abby looked at the title, she was surprised to find that it was some nonsensical romantic book. Clearly shown. Clearly designed to create a false practically smut. Designed to entice silly women who weren't pretty enough to be hussies themselves. Designed to entice silly women who weren't pretty enough to be hussies themselves. Am I spelling hussies wrong? Hussies. Yeah, there we go. To be hussies themselves. What on earth is this? She stated with just an ounce of disgust touching her lips. Why, this is what you asked for, milady. This is... Why, this is what you asked for, milady. Are you deaf? I do believe I asked for something autistic. Okay. Let's figure this out here. I do believe I asked for something artistic. Not the man. Mr. Benson. if he was pleased. But milady, this book is the very definition of artistic. But milady, this book is the very definition of artistic. This book, this novel, demonstrates quite clearly the art of swooning and other side of the coin, the art of being swooned. How to swoon? Respond when swooning, as it were. Yes, I'm liking this. Alright. But milady, this book is the very definition of artistic. This novel, demonstrates quite clearly the art of swooning, and on the other side of the coin, the art of being swooned. How to swoon and how to respond when swooning, as it were. We are headed in the right direction, people. Headed in the right direction. Okay. A dash of red touched Abby's cheeks, but she strings. A dash of red touched Abby's cheeks, but she did not let it affect her vocal strings. Let's see here. She did not let it touch her vocal strings. Swooning is hardly an art, sir. And how would you know? Mr. Benson continued. Yes, he did. Simply let the silence speak for itself. And you have much experience with such things. Actions, words or atmosphere. It is a skill. I myself consider simply doing the things, but in the detail, how you do them. When a man When a man kisses a woman, how hard? Woman's hand, how hard shall his lips press? Kiss with precision and make and give the right kind of eye contact. The type of eye contact that tells a woman she is not lusted after, but desired with a passion. That in doing so, he is not simply telling her. In doing so, he is not simply telling her that he wishes to bed her. But that he wishes to give her. And reminder, this is just me writing right now. I haven't thought about this or done an outline or anything, so I imagine that there's going to be quite a bit of editing for this short story. Abby's Abbey is the name of the short story. Whew. Let's see here. But that he wishes to give her her every desire. That her needs come first, and he will fulfill those needs, wants, and urges with great gusto. Clutching the pink romantic novel. Clutching the pink romantic novel to her heaving chest, not sure what to do. Manner to her, least of all, a simple the entire ordeal was quite unacceptable. Intrigued her so greatly. Well, milady, I shall leave you to your romance. I shall leave you to your literature on the arts. I shall leave you to your studies on the art of romance. I shall leave you to the studies on the art of romance. Quick. With another low bow, Mr. Benson disappeared. Mr. Benson finally gave Abby the peace she typically enjoyed. No, that's right. Don't tell me I'm doing it wrong. Don't tell me that's wrong. Okay. And with another low bow, Mr. Benson finally gave Abby the peace she typically enjoyed. Let's think for a moment here. We are going to go with... let's talk about... However, today, the peace felt far lonelier. Lonelier than usual. Felt lonely. However, today, brash. Coming into her Abby and giving her smut to read. No, this would not do. Typing too fast, going too fast, making all kinds of mistakes, but I don't care because I'm not editing. Everyone out there, remember, write drunk, edit sober. She would have to fire him immediately. Well, she could suffer him until as she opened up her smut, something odd happened. She found herself the uncultured words, cultured pages, flipped through them. Which she found odd. And the gentleman. Let's clean this up. I know we're not editing, but we kind of are. The gentleman was quite rough in his ways. Being so rough, there was a certain rugged appeal. What they could be if they were together. Purpose of showing her what they could be if they were together. Silly notion. As Abby awoke from having once again fallen asleep in the middle of reading, she found a simple note. I'm using the word simple far too much today. I need to settle this down. No more simple. As Abby awoke from having once again fallen asleep in the middle of reading, she found... What did she find? She found a note written by Mr. Benson and left outside the staff entrance. Here's the other staff. How scandalous. How scandalous. How scandalous, Abby thought to herself. How could she? Just like chapter. Yes. This was an encounter she couldn't miss. And had taken an ungodly amount of time ensuring her maid did a proper job with her hair. In the blink of an instant, as a bag was and she was unceremoniously thrown into a burlap sack. The sack was then thrown into a carriage. How exciting, Abby thought to herself. Abby waited patiently. Since she is actually a milady, she would use knight the proper way, so we're not going to use that. We're going to say hero to come rescue her. Quite. She was getting quite uncomfortable. I am just misspelling everything right now. Thank goodness we are not editing right now. There's always time to edit afterwards. There was an ample amount of flexibility in the burlap sack. There wasn't an ample amount of flexibility in the burlap sack. There was not an ample amount of flexibility in the burlap sack. And the wood was not the most comfortable places to lie down. Abby decided that Mr. Benson would surely little bit. While kidnapped, had used a few needles to loosen a knot. It took a little finagling, but she decided to do the same with the pins in her hair. It took a little finagling, but with steady fingers, she decided to do the same with the pins in her hair. It took a little finagling, but with her steady fingers and patience, slowly pry the knot apart until she loosened her burlap dungeon. Crawling out, she saw that the carriage was of plain wood, not nearly the not nearly the posh, comfortable, cushioned carriages. Mm. It was a coach at best. All right. Let's see here. What are we gonna do? We are going to um, no reason to spoil of freeing her. But her father didn't even care enough to. Crowns for this girl. I know she's a princess and all, but her father didn't even care enough. Or less. Lesser bishop. I like that. I like using lesser bishop. Okay, let's go with that. Even a lesser bishop would be better than nothing. Shoulder pats and unbridled cackling. All too. She was aghast at how exciting the moment had seemed, and now it turned out to be all too plain. Why women who were things were kidnapped, ransomed every day. Let's think a moment. We've got this, guys. We can do it. Let's think. Just a moment. We're going to go. We're kidnapped and ransomed every day. Let's save it just in case we need to for later. Big romantic gestures. Those were rare. Did I not spell rubies right? Yeah. Rubies. Rubies. Big romantic gestures. Those were rarer than Dark Continent rubies. Hang on. What year? Okay, hang on. I gotta look this up. What year did women start wearing heels? That's the question we need to look up right now. Pointy heels specifically, because I would like for her to grab pointy heels and smash them into the faces or the neck of one of the gentlemen. But I don't know. Let's find out. Um, what year did women start wearing pointy heels? Okay. When did pointy heels become popular? 1960. Nope, it's not going to work. Okay, so no pointy heels. Let's keep things historically accurate to some regard, at least a minor regard. 1960. That seems really late. But I do know that heels typically meant more just raised shoe and not the traditional pointiness that we think of today. Okay. Let's get this going. Looking around the coach, she couldn't find any device intended All right, let's do this again. We're going to get really specific. Let's find out. Let's Google search how many pounds of pressure to dislodge an Adam's apple. Can you crush an... No. Can you break an apple with your hands? No, that's not what I want. I want the Adam's apple. Okay. When strangling someone... Here, I'm going to bring things over here so you guys can see. When strangling someone, how many pounds of pressure to crush an Adam's apple? When strangling someone, how many pounds of pressure to crush an Adam's apple? Yes, that's what I meant. How many pressure does it take to strangle? 33 pounds, 3 times as much pressure. To completely close off the trachea. Very low pressure on both the corroded arteries or the veins for 10 seconds is necessary to cause unconsciousness. However, if the pressure is immediately released, consciousness will be regained within 10 seconds. To completely close off the trachea, 3 times as much, 33 pounds. Okay. So let's use that. That's a good thing to use. That's what we're going to do. She'd read about how it took 33 pounds of pressure to completely close off the trachea. She was pretty sure. Instant. But she knew it wouldn't. But she also knew it wouldn't be instant. No, she had to. My goodness, what are we thinking here? But she also knew it wouldn't be instant. No, she had to do something quick. Something to inflict. For her, so as not to allow for her victim to struggle or his partner in crime to intervene. She wasn't too worried about her captors. Realizing it's not a wagon. Wagon wheels sounds good. You know what? I'm gonna leave it in for now, even though it is a coach, just because wagon wheels sounds good, and maybe that'll be fine. Maybe that'll end up being what we do. Okay, let's see here. Let's see what we can do. Okay, we're gonna go. Between their nonsensical conversation about horrors and the sound of hooves, wagon wheels, there was little to no chance they'd hear. Crafting her weapon. Why is it saying that's wrong? That's not wrong. I need to go into the settings and figure out why some words that are correct are coming up red. I think it's because it wants me to change it to the different kind of here, but I'm just not going to let that happen right now. Whew, my ears are getting hot. Okay. There was little to no chance they'd hear her crafting. Simple yet deadly weapon. She knew. Okay, let's find out where the artery is. She had read in a medical journal that the let's see. Where exactly is the carotid artery? carotid artery. She had read in a medical journal that the carotid artery is in the neck. Is in the neck. Lined up directly with the ear. The biggest part of the artery is about 3 inches below the ear. The biggest part of the artery is about 3 inches below the ear. Here. Once severed. How long does it take for someone to bleed out from the carotid artery? Once severed, once punctured, death would once punctured, anyone stopping the bleeding, death would ensue in approximately 15 seconds. Approximately 15 seconds. She figured this was the easiest way to deal with her. She figured this was the easiest way to deal with one of the ruffians. Improvise the second one's demise. To kill Ugly Hat first. Yes. Kill Ugly Hat first, for sure. We want her to kill Ugly Hat first, right? It's the only real way to do it. Kill Ugly Hat first. Let's think for a second. How are we going to do this? Oh my gosh, you guys can't see my face. There we go. Now you can see my face because I moved the little thing. Alright. So the only sensible thing would be to kill Ugly Hat first. That way, enter. She could have ushered the horses on. She could have ushered the horses onward to ensure anticlimactic. Something having to do with her being kidnapped and now he was dead. The table's turning, or some remark that... let's see here. Something having to do with her being kidnapped and now he was dead. The table's turning, or some... Table's turning. But a remark that was more original than that. Let him come to her and give her a few extra seconds to think on it. She decided to throw her makeshift weapon away. Freeing up her fingers. Okay. How is she going to defeat him, guys? There are ways to do this. Let's think. Okay. Drink some water real quick. My throat is dry. Okay, we're gonna have him do the traditional Roman swing. The downward, the big downward swing. She'd read about such strikes from Roman soldiers' journals in their dealings with savages, and how disciplined warriors could easily handle such things. down. Hang on. The blade came down. She brought her... As the blade came down... She gave a quick trapping around the handle. She gave a quick... See here. She gave a quick kick with her back foot to the front of his kneecap. With a yelp of surprise. Towards its wielder. Clasping her hand as if she were praying, she brought her wrist in on its... She brought his wrist in on itself, pointing the blade towards its wielder, and drove her hips upwards, plunging the blade deep into his chest. Watching the life slowly fade from his eyes, she said with the hint of a smile on her face, "May God have mercy. Mercy. May God have mercy upon your black heart." And with that, that's an exciting way for her to kill him, right? And with that, she dragged the blade free, sending a stream of blood spraying. And with that, she dragged the blade free, sending a stream of blood spraying. She could have most certainly. She could have most certainly come up with a better line. She gave a sigh to herself. She could have most certainly come up with a better line. To say, struck down her Sari. She got back on the coach and began the journey home. And how real life adventures She got back on the coach and began the journey home. It was good to get some sunshine, but she missed her books dearly. Today had been a nice reminder on why books were better than men, and how real-life adventures were never quite as good. Been a nice reminder on why she preferred books to men. And that real-life adventures were never quite as good as the ones found between the pages of a novel. Well, we have something. I think it's alright. It's definitely going to make Patreon. I don't think I'm going to try and throw this at a magazine, though. As much as I love querying magazines for publication, I think that this is going to be just a Patreon story. Like a lot of the other Patreon stories I've published on there. All right, let's go through and start the editing process, shall we? And I'm going to read out loud. It just helps me edit better, helps me read it better. And for this editing process, I'm actually going to change it up a little bit, because I always edit better when I'm not working in... I always write in Pages, and then when I actually edit, I edit in Google Docs. Google Docs does a better job helping me edit. Alright, so let's see here. Look at all these recent documents. I've been working, guys. Sailing voyage meditation is... I've never worked on a meditation before. It was kind of fun to write a guided meditation. Kind of made me feel like Inception, like You experience this, and therefore you do feel this way. Edith is a fun story because it ends with a pun. My Happiest Day is a good story because it's the happiest day, but then also the saddest day. They fall on the same day. Little Fella is kind of interesting. Little Fella is about a woman who really wants to get pregnant. She's writing stories to the unborn fetus, and and every journal entry is what you're reading. You're reading the days as journal entries. And then A Mother's Touch is about a woman who is really wants to have a child, and she will do anything she can to have one. Ho ho ho. All right. Let's throw this in here, shall we? Why are you being so slow right now, Google Docs? Come on. Thank you. Give me my cursor. Give me my cursor. Thank you so much. Okay. Clearly I have like zero internet right now. Probably because Streamlabs is taking it all up. Holy criminy. That's how you're going to paste? Come on now. You're usually better than this. You are better than this. Okay. Oh, now's the boring editing portion, guys. I don't blame you if you don't stick around. Highlight everything right now so we can edit. Highlight it all right now. Highlight it all right now. Highlight it all right now so we can edit. Okay. Let's go to 12. Not 13, 12. Thank you. All right, line and paragraph spacing. We're going to double. Because that's how you do it, folks. If you don't know how to edit, it's 12, Arial, and double. That's how you do it. And then I always do 16 and bold on the title. And the document is Abby's Abby. Yay, good job, document. And we're going to share this with our fabulous and wonderful editor. You are an editor. Hey, help me edit this thing when you get a chance. Appreciate you. Send. So for those of you who don't know, editors make the world go round. If you don't have a good editor to look over everything and tell you where you messed up, you're not. You need it. You need that. It's just something that you absolutely need as a person, as a human being. And I highly recommend it. Okay, editing. Abby was a princess, not the type you read about who are destined to become queen and rule the land with grace and elegance. No, Abby was the type of princess no one ever heard of, for she was the youngest of 7. It was not her destiny to grace the history books with great deeds, treaties made, wars won, or delivering her people from cruelty. Abby was destined to die in obscurity. This suited her just fine. She was shy and attention was tortuous. Abby would rather a heavy fever descended upon her, full of chills and throwing up any foods that touched her stomach, than having strangers try to actually speak to her. Growing up, being forced to attend balls and elegant soirees was a fate far worse than death. Gosh dang it, my throat. Having people actually come up and introduce others to her felt like a tooth being slowly crushed in a vice grip, until it was nothing but a mass of hard white pieces jammed into bleeding gums. Of course, realizing how much she hated social interactions, her sisters took it upon themselves to find the most handsome of gentlemen, and bring them over to terrorize defenseless Abby. Handsome as they might have been, they repulsed her. She'd rather rush a charging boar than have her ears raped by another hunting story. Every handsome young man had a hunting story. Once the story was over, they'd try to impress her with talk of their fortunes, riches, or future successes. They'd promise the moon and stars if it meant a chance at her hand. Everyone wants to marry a princess, mostly for the titles and land that come with her. No, these men didn't really care about Abby, and therefore she didn't really care for them. She became a queen in her own right. The queen of being so icy, they left her alone, never to try and utter a sentence to her again. That all left her alone, never to try and utter a sentence to her again. She mastered shooting daggers from her eyes. One look from her, and the bachelors did an about-face and marched away in defeat before the battle had even begun. Marched away in defeat. Before the battle could begin. One look from her, and the bachelors did an about-face and marched away in defeat before the battle even began. One look from her, and the bachelors did an about-face and marched away in defeat before the battle even began. It wasn't long before the king had given up on his youngest daughter ever finding a man, which pleased him greatly. He had plenty of other daughters to trade away in diplomatic marriages. He liked his youngest's spirit and tough nature. He thought her more brave at not wanting a man than fearful and anxious about the possibility of talking with them. He thought her brave for not wanting a man. It never occurred to him she was actually fearful and anxious about the possibility of talking with them. It never occurred to him that she was actually fearful and anxious about the possibility of talking to them. His ignorance was his bliss. He thought she would have made an excellent son, and it was a shame such sexual magic of transforming from one gender into another didn't exist. As a reward to his daughter for not marrying, However, he found himself glad that it didn't, for surely everyone would become men, and not a single and then who would have all the children? However, he found himself glad that it didn't, for surely everyone would choose to become a man, and then no babies could be birthed, and then no heirs. That's how we say it. Heirs could be birthed. As a reward to his daughter for not marrying, he gave Abby an abbey. This was, of course, only given in name, as a woman could never own property. Such a thing was unthinkable. Anyone who tried to think of it was doing witchy thinking. Women who tried to own a foot of land clearly needed to be burned alive. A lot of people forget when burning women to use damp hay. Dry hay goes up too fast, and the woman dies too quick. Too quick. And the woman dies too quick, too fast, and the woman dies too fast. The peasants need a screaming woman to think about while they toil in the fields. Abby, of course, knew this. She knew most every bit of knowledge that this world had to offer. Not because of schooling, of course. Women need not be bothered by men in brown robes instructing them with parchment and pen. No, Abby learned everything through books. An avid reader, she spent every waking hour with her nose in a book. She couldn't get enough of exciting. She couldn't get enough. Spent every waking. She couldn't get enough. She couldn't get enough exciting stories. She couldn't get enough exciting stories in her life. An avid reader, she spent every waking moment with her nose in a book. Knights charging into combat, damsels in distress, dragons raging overhead, and political intrigue filled her head. Overhead and filled her head don't sound good. Filled her mind. That's better. It's all about the little word choices, people. The excitement the princess is in her stories experienced was far superior to the mundane existence she'd experienced in her own royal life. She couldn't get let's do something about her being an addict. Like an addict, her hunger for novels couldn't be sabated. More than once, her mother yelled across the More than once, her mother yelled across the dining table that ladies ate. While at supper. They did not read. They did not. Okay, there's a good way to say this. There is a really good way to say this. Like an act, her hunger for novels couldn't be sabated. More than once, her mother yelled across the dining table that ladies ate while at supper. They were not rude. Hiding books in their laps. Her father, on the other hand, did a poor job hiding his smiles at her impertinence. That's why he chose to give her the abbey. That's why he chose to give her the abbey. That's why he chose to give her the abbey on her 18th birthday. Within the abbey's walls sat the greatest collection of books ever collected. The library held every major modern work alongside classics, both historical and fiction. Through the literary lens of great poets, historians, philosophers, and authors, Abby enjoyed the world and devoured its pages with great glee. After a month at the Abbey, Abby had 4 staff members: a chef to keep her fed, a footman to tell people to leave when they came to visit, a maid to wash her clothes, and most importantly, her personal librarian. The librarian was an older gentleman named Stevens. Mr. Stevens was well versed in literature, and with his guidance, Princess Abby was never without a good book. At a whim, she'd call Mr. Stevens over and ask for a good novel by a specific author, and he'd have it pronto. It wasn't uncommon for Abby to give him a laundry list of novels, asking for an adventure, comedy, historic fiction, philosophy, work of philosophy, or an ancient scientific publication. No matter what the request, Mr. Stevens never failed to produce an excellent work. No matter let's take out I'm the worst at putting in these extra little words. I just need to keep them out. Need to keep the extra little words out of the writing. No matter the request, Mr. Stevens never failed to produce an excellent work that wouldn't waste her time, and Abby consumed all he gave her. Abby read for years, turning down all manner of invites to holiday celebrations, weddings, balls, and award ceremonies. The princess had no need for the outside world. She consumed all the marrow of life from the pages of books, from the pages she read. We're going to leave it. We're going to leave it for now. For now. Yeah. The sun pictured with black and white text was far more vivid to her eyes than the real thing could ever be. She felt no need to travel. Through her pages, Abby had experienced the entire world. Through her pages, she laid eyes on the Pumekale Minter Springs in Turkey, the structural glory of the Taj Mahal, summited Mount Fuji, danced along the towering rocks of Meteora, and swam through the Great Barrier Reef. Abby hardly ever used her bed. The Chase Lounge was quite comfortable and much more conducive for reading. It was a common occurrence for her to fall asleep only to wake up and be overly annoyed at having to flip through pages, trying to find her place in the book she'd fallen asleep to. Excuse me. My goodness. After being coaxed into clean clothes, eating a quick breakfast brought to her in the library, and being given a new book, her morning routine was complete. Lunch would be tea and finger sandwiches, and dinner would be chef's choice, usually something with far too much meat and not enough gravy for Abby's taste. On this lovely morning, as the sunlight tickled her nose awake, Abby found an unfamiliar face staring over her. She felt naked and vulnerable at the stranger watching her helpless form passed out upon her Chase Lounge. As creepy as she found it, she also thought it oddly tantalizing. "Greetings, milady," he said with a deep bow. "I'm afraid your librarian has taken ill. I am Mr. Benson, and I am at your service." Your librarian, let's call that, I'm afraid Mr. Stevens has taken ill. I am Mr. Benson, and I am at your service. Abby gave a long practice yawn and stretch, keeping her voice in a tight, I don't really care relaxation meets boredom kind of tone. "Find me a book, something artsy." Very good, milady, and with another low bow he turned on his heels and was off. Not 2 minutes later, Mr. Benson returned carrying a colorful pink-covered novel, quite different from the normally bland tan, gray, brown, or black covers Abby was used to. She placed the novel in her hands with a hint of a wink, so subtle it could have been the twitch of an eye. Could have been the twitch of an eye. As Abby looked at the title, she was surprised to find it was some nonsensical romantic novel, practically smut, designed to entice silly women who weren't pretty enough to be hussies themselves. What on earth is this? She asked, with just an ounce of disgust touching her lips. Why, this is what you asked for, milady. Are you deaf? I do believe I asked for something artistic. Mr. Benson gave her a slight smile, as if he was pleased at her rejecting his proposed reading material. But, milady, this book is the very definition of artistic. This novel, demonstrates quite clearly the art of swooning, and on the other side of the coin, the art of being swooned. How to swoon and how to respond when swooning, as it were. A dash of red touched Abby's cheeks, but she did not let it affect her vocal strings. Swooning is hardly an art, sir. And you have much experience with such things? Abby did not respond, but simply let the silence speak for itself. Mr. Benson continued. Creating romance with actions, words, or atmosphere is a skill, an artistic one I myself consider most important. It is not simply doing the things, but in the details of how you do them. When a man kisses a woman's hand, how hard shall his lips press? Too light, and he might as well be a friendly uncle. And he might... Too light, and he might as well be a friendly uncle. Too heavy, and he is no better than a rapscallion to her. No, he must bend just right, kiss with precision, and give the right kind of eye contact. The type of eye contact that tells a woman she is not lusted after, but desired with a passion. In doing so, he is not simply telling her that he wishes to bed her, but that he wishes to give her her every desire, that her needs come first, and he will fulfill those needs, wants, and urges with great gusto. Abby sat quite shocked, clutching the pink romantic novel to her heaving chest, not sure what to do. No one had dared ever speak in such a manner to her, at least of all a plain librarian. Least of all an ordinary household staff. Least of all, an ordinary household servant. The entire ordeal was quite unacceptable, and perhaps that's why it intrigued her so greatly. Well, milady, I shall leave you to your studies on the art of romance. And with another low bow, Mr. Benson finally gave Abby the peace she typically enjoyed. However, today the peace felt lonely. Who was this brash librarian coming into her Abby and giving her smut to read? No, this would not do. She would have to fire him immediately. Well, maybe not immediately. She supposed she could suffer him until her normal librarian recovered. As she opened up her smut, something odd happened. She found herself actually enjoying the uncultured pages as she flipped through them. The romantic woman was herself called Abby, and which she found odd. The gentleman was quite rough in his ways, but in being so rough, there was a certain rugged appeal. It was almost as if Mr. Benson had chosen this book for the purpose of showing her what they could be. Let's take out all those extra words now, shall we? Always remember, edit twice as much as you write. or expect half of what you write to make it through the editing process. There you go. After I'm done with this, my editor will take a look at it and she will destroy what I've written. But by doing so, she'll make it better, or at least more grammatically correct. A silly notion, of course. A lady holding the title of princess and a common librarian. Of course, Abby was in no way common or living by social cues. By social standards. Is that the word to use? Yeah, we'll keep that word for now. Perhaps there was something to this. As she read the book, she couldn't help but consider how Mr. Benson might kiss her hand. As Abby awoke from having once again fallen asleep in the middle of reading, she found a note written by Mr. Benson and left on her book. Written by Mr. Benson and left on her book. It detailed plans to meet him outside the staff entrance come tea time, that the two of them might be alone, and away from, again, too many words, away from others' ears. That the two of them might be alone and away from others' ears. How scandalous, Abby thought to herself, just like chapter 8, where the book Abby goes to have a secret picnic with a scoundrel and finds herself kidnapped by ruffians, only for them all to be slaughtered and herself rescued, picked up, and kissed on a stallion shining pure white. Yes, this was an encounter she couldn't miss. Is that the way we want to word that? Is that the way we want to word that? How scandalous, Abby thought to herself. Just like chapter 8, where, take out the extra word, where book Abby indulges in a secret picnic presented by the scoundrel. Only to find herself kidnapped by ruffians. Soon the ruffians are slaughtered and herself rescued, picked up, and kissed on a stallion shining pure white. Yes, this was an encounter she couldn't miss. Alone and away from... Abby dressed herself in her best picnic dress and riding boots, just in case, and had taken an ungodly amount of time ensuring her maid did a proper job with her hair. Just in case a white stallion was in her future. Just in case a white stallion was in her future. And had taken on ungodly amount of time ensuring her maid did a proper job with her hair. Abby now stood outside of the Abbey's thick stone walls, awaiting the librarian of her dreams. In the blink of an instant, all the world went dark, as a bag was placed over Abby's head, her body picked up, and she was unceremoniously thrown into a burlap sack. The sack was then thrown into a carriage, which began to move at an uncommonly fast pace. How exciting, Abby thought to herself. A kidnapping staged by the let's quotation mark that just for fun. Let's have it all be in her head. A kidnapping staged by the librarian, Mr. Benson, no doubt to give him the opportunity to rescue her and thus ensure their falling madly in love with each other. Okay, let's leave it without the quote. I don't know. We'll leave it. We'll leave it alone for now. I'll get with my editor and see what she thinks in a little bit. I'm sure that she'll want to revise some of this, but no doubt to give him the opportunity to rescue her and thus ensure they're falling madly in love with each other. Of course, Abby would never fall madly in love with anyone, but she could see herself perhaps falling in a sensible amount of love with him. But she could possibly see herself. Of course, madly would never fall in love with anyone. Of course, Abby would never fall madly in love with anyone. She could see herself perhaps falling in a sensible amount of love with him. She could see herself perhaps falling into a sensible amount of love. Especially if he was going to be so romantic about the whole courtship. Abby awaited. I'm gonna leave it as awaited. I know that might not be right, but it kind of sounds fun, right? Abby awaited patiently for her hero to come rescue her. To her rescue. Abby awaited patiently for her hero to come to her rescue. But after about an hour in the carriage, she was getting quite uncomfortable. There wasn't ample flexibility in the burlap sack, and the wood was not the most comfortable of places to lay. Abby decided that Mr. Benson would surely forgive her if she escaped for just a little while. Not bit. A little while. Abby decided that Mr. Benson would surely forgive her if she escaped for just a little while before returning herself to a helpless state of damsel. Before returning herself to a helpless state of damsel in distress. She had read about a young knight who, while kidnapped, had used a few needles to loosen a knot enough to escape. She decided to do the same with the pins in her hair. It took a little finagling, but with her steady fingers and patience, she was able to slowly pry the knot apart until she was free of her burlap dungeon. Crawling out, she saw that the carriage was a plain wood, not nearly the posh, comfortable, cushioned carriages she was used to. No, this was no carriage. It was a coach at best. I like the clean, short sentences, but it makes more sense if we just use a comma. Yeah. No, this was no carriage. It was a coach at best. Sitting up, she could see past the woods straight to the drivers. There were two of them, a man who wore the ugliest and cheapest faded gray hat Abby had ever seen. The gentleman next to him was none other than Mr. Benson himself. She was right. They had kidnapped her so he could play the hero. Abby decided that if they looked back her way, she would do her best to jump back in the sack. No reason to spoil Mr. Benson's fun of rescuing her. Let's get some water. Okay. The ugly-headed The ugly-hatted one spoke gravelly, with a gravelly voice as he continued a conversation she was now free to hear. And you really think we'll get a full 5,000 crowns for this girl? I know she's a princess and all, but her father didn't even care enough to marry the poor lass to a good husband. I understand being the youngest, and she might not be worthy of a king, but perhaps a duke, or even a lesser bishop, would be better than nothing. Mr. Benson gave a not-so-gentlemanly spit before he answered in a tone not nearly as smooth as Abby recalled having heard him speak earlier. Not nearly as smooth as Abby recalled having heard him speak earlier. Recalled hearing. As smooth as Abby recalled hearing him speak earlier. Are you kidding? He gave Princess Abby an entire Abbey all to herself. Why, we don't even need to deal with the king. Her estate manager could sell pieces of her Abbey, and Abby would, in a sense, be able to pay her own ransom. £5,000 isn't all that much when you consider the size of the when you consider the size of the estate, when you consider the size of the abbey. 5,000 crowns is all that much when you consider the size of the abbey and the surrounding grounds. Shoot, even just selling a few stables and horses. Couple acres of livestock and 5,000 crowns will be on our way. Shoot, even just selling a few stables, horses, and a couple acres of livestock. 5,000 crowns will be on our way. We'll be on our way. Knowing now what happens to them, I like adding this part right here about no one getting hurt. Let's take out even though. Nah, let's keep even in. Golly, I think of all the ale and whores we'll be able to afford, and with that they erupted in shoulder pats and unbridled cackling. Abby sat back for a moment. She couldn't believe what she heard. She was aghast at how exciting the moment had seemed, and now it turned out to be all too plain. Why, women who were worth things were kidnapped and ransomed every day. But big romantic gestures, those were rarer than dark continent rubies. How unfortunately ordinary, and the worst part was how disappointing the librarian Mr. Benson had turned out to be. She thought him a decent man, a fellow book lover who knew... A fellow book lover... Nah, we'll leave book lover. I don't know. Literature kind of comes to mind, but we'll leave it how it is for a moment. She thought him a decent man, a fellow book lover who knew how to kiss a woman's hand properly. Turns out he was just another dog who wanted nothing but to be drunk with hussies. Of course, she couldn't blame the hussies. Women needed to eat too. Oh well. Abby decided to just deal with the all too ordinary problem. After all, there was no way she could stand around hoping to be saved, and she'd die before she let a man like this negatively impact her beautiful home, sell off parts of her abbey, She'd never allow such a thing, especially not the stables where the gorgeous creatures were kept. No, she'd have to get her hands dirty. Looking around the coach, she couldn't find any device intended for bodily harm. She considered attempting to strangle one of the men from behind. She'd read about how it took 33 pounds of pressure to completely close off the trachea. She was pretty sure she could inflict 33 pounds of pressure with her hands and strangle a man. She was pretty sure she could inflict 33 pounds of pressure with her hands and strangle a man. But she also knew it wouldn't be instant. No, she had to do something to inflict a significant amount of damage quickly, so as not to allow... Quickly. Not allowing... Let's just take out all the extra words. I'm throwing a lot of extra words in here, trying to make it sound all posh. No, she had to do something to inflict a significant amount of damage quickly, not allowing her victim to struggle or his partner in crime to intervene. No, she had to do something to inflict a significant amount of damage quickly, not allowing her victim to struggle or his partner in crime to intervene. With a bit more searching, she found a plank that had been cracked. With a little coaxing, the plank gave way. She was able to slowly break off a few bits and pieces of wood until she was left with a fairly pointy end she thought would do just fine for stabbing. She wasn't too worried about her captors realizing what she was doing. Between their nonsensical conversations about horrors and the sound of horse hooves meeting wagon wheels, there was little to no chance they'd hear her crafting the simple yet deadly weapon. She had read in a medical journal that the carotid artery is in the neck. The carotid artery in the neck. She had read in a medical journal that the carotid artery in the neck lined up directly with the ear. The biggest part of the artery was about 3 inches below the ear. We're not going to bellow. It's below. Did I really write bellow? My goodness. What is happening to me today? Once punctured, without anyone stopping the bleeding, death would ensue in approximately 15 seconds. She figured this was the easiest way to deal with one of the ruffians. She'd have to improvise the second one's demise. She considered her targets for a moment and decided the only sensible thing would be to kill Ugly Hat first. That way she could have a little novelistic banter back and forth with her former lover. Well, not exactly former, but almost lover was close enough for Abby. Yes, this would play into the story quite nicely. She'd stand toe-to-toe, exchange a little witty banter, then have at each other like a pair of swashbucklers. Abby slowly stood up, pointed the tip of her small plank spear at her target's artery, and with a mighty heave threw her entire body into the strike. It worked as well as she'd imagined. In the shock of it all, Mr. Benson jumped off the coach with a scream. Ugly Hat's blood sprayed all over Abby in the most storybook fashion as she wrenched her weapon free of his neck. He crumpled to the ground, falling off the coach, soon to be dead. Let's swap that around, because you fall off the couch before you crumple. So we're going to... Falling off the coach... He crumpled to the dirt. He crumpled to the dirt. Soon to be dead. Soon to be lifeless. Falling off the coach, he crumpled to the dirt. Soon to be lifeless. Abby sat up front where her attackers were. Abby moved up front. Abby moved. Abby moved up front to where her attackers were once seated, taking hold of the reins. She could have ushered the horses onwards to ensure a great escape, but she thought that a very anticlimactic end to her tale. No, that wouldn't do. She pulled the reins in, stopping the horses, and slowly dismounted the coach. She hoped that the blood splatter made her look quite the fierce figure. Splatter made her look quite the fierce figure, like a Viking shield maiden of old. Dusting himself off, Mr. Benson approached her, drawing a sword. Abby thought it was a real shame the sword wasn't a bit bigger, more masculine and warrior-like. She supposed the stories likely embellished such things, being that all the stories were written by men. So she decided not to hold the size of Mr. Benson's sword against him. She supposed the stories likely embellished such things, being that all the stories were written by men. So she decided not to hold the size of Mr. Benson's sword against him. "You no good bitch! I'll gut you! I'll gut you and string you up from the nearest tree. You're dead." Abby gave a disappointed sigh. This wasn't nearly the witty banter she'd hoped for. What primitive and unoriginal threats. She decided such vulgar language didn't even deserve a response. No, she'd simply deal with him. But she should figure out something witty to say herself after she dispatched herself while she dispatched him. Something having to do with her being kidnapped and now he was dead. The tables turning, but a remark that was more original than that. She figured she'd let him come to her and give her a few extra seconds to think on it. She knew her wooden plank was a poor defense against his sword. Regardless of its small size, she decided to throw her makeshift weapon away, freeing up her fingers. She overviewed her opponent. She analyzed her opponent. She analyzed her opponent. He had little to no stance, and he gripped the sword heavy, and he gripped the sword tightly. He had little to no stance, and he gripped the sword tightly. She could see from the swing of his arm that he was likely to try and bring the blade straight down on her. A large motion, easy to anticipate. She'd read about such strikes from Roman soldiers. She could see from the swing of his arm that, I'm gonna take out. I'll listen to you, editing software. This time. A large motion, easy to anticipate. She'd read about such strikes from Roman soldiers' journals in their dealings with savages, and how the disciplined warriors could easily handle such things. Having read about their exploits, she figured she could reenact their fighting styles. A quick sidestep brought her out of the sword's reach. As the blade came down, she grabbed his hand with both of hers, trapping it around the handle, and effectively controlling the weapon. She gave a quick kick with her back foot to the front of his kneecap, hurting him and bringing him off balance. Giving him a limp and taking away his balance. Giving him a limp and taking away his balance. With a yelp of surprise, he looked at her with sudden fear in his eyes, clasping her hands as if she were praying. She brought his wrist in on itself, pointing the blade towards its wielder, and driving her hips upwards. She plunged the blade deep into his chest. Clasping her hands as if she were praying, she brought his wrist in on itself, pointing the blade towards its wielder and driving her hips upwards. She plunged the blade deep into his chest. Watching the life. Thank you very much, editor. Slowly fade from his eyes. Watching the life slowly fade from his eyes, she said with a hint of a smile on her face, "May God have mercy upon your black heart." And with that, she dragged the blade free, sending a stream of blood spraying. Releasing a stream of blood. Releasing geyser of blood. Because I think I used stream higher up there, so we'll use geyser this time. But I spelled geyser wrong. But I did spell a kind of geyser. Haha. Half the battle. She gave a sigh to herself. She sighed to herself. She could have most certainly come up with a better line to say as she struck down her adversary. If only she'd had a little more time. Time to prepare. If only she'd had a little more time to prepare. She decided next time she was kidnapped, she would wait to escape until she knew what she wanted to say in her story. She decided next time she was kidnapped, she would wait until she had her lines practiced and memorized. sighed to herself. She could have most certainly come up with a better line to say as she struck down her adversary. If only she'd had a little more time to prepare. She decided next time she was kidnapped, she would wait until she had her lines practiced and memorized. Lines, there's a better way. What's another word to say? Lines, grammar. Alright, we're going to do a Google search because we're cheating. We're a cheating bunch here. Okay. Thank you, Google. How long does it take to... Or no. What am I searching? I am searching for... we're going to search for... You say rehearsed speech. I'm gonna have to think about this one. I'm gonna leave it for as lines for now, but I'm gonna think on what word I'm looking for because I know that there's a specific word out there that I'm not quite getting. She would wait until she had her lines practiced and memorized. Her next kidnapping tale would be much improved with a little forethought. She'd also work to prolong the fight scenes a bit. These ones ended so suddenly she had little time to relish them. She got back on the coach and began the journey home. It was good to get some sunshine, but she missed her books dearly. Today had been a nice reminder on why she preferred books to men, and that real-life adventures were never quite as good as the ones found between the pages of a novel. The end. Okay, I think we're going to call it good there for now. I'm going to have my editor look over. I'm going to look it over, and I'm hungry, so I'm going to go get something to eat, and then maybe I'll come back on in a little bit and start working on the novel that I've been working on. I just starting to edit page or chapter 5. And it's going to be the 8th draft of it, so. And then we'll keep going through the query list. So, thank you all so much for being here. TikTok, you're awesome. YouTube, you're awesome. Twitch, as always. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and enjoy a good book.